G'day, Ancient Mahara here, to talk about borderline radioactivity. It is codependent kryptonite. And if you resonate with me, I'm out here to help you, to strategize, to disconnect, to overcome the chemical soup of you can't stop thinking about ruminating, wanting them back, needing that hit again. I'm out here to help you if I resonate with you, because this journey after these relationships and through codependency recovery requires expert help that puts you first. The person with BPD, in the initial exposure that you have to them, the idealization, the mirroring, and their codependent people-pleasing phase, where they seek to merge with you and get identity from you. In that initial exposure, the initial exposure to the radioactive effect of the person with borderline personality will not have immediate effects. It's not an obvious problem, pain, or challenge right away. And for some, it might not be for quite a long time. More often than not, it is, or it was, quite the slow creep opposite. Depends on the dose, so to speak. Depends if you are with or were with a quiet or acting out borderline. You may not have known at all what was in store for you then, like you know today the results of being mired in the radioactivity and the radiation ruination of yourself. If one has been exposed to radiation, you might not know that for a period of time. The beginning of romantic relationships with a person with BPD, more often than not, right, in the idealization and everything phase, the siren song, the too good to be true, but you didn't know it then, is very alluring, exciting, and it moves so very quickly. It's so physically enticing. It's intense. You want it. You need it. You choose it. And you have no way at this point to know what you're exposing yourself to. The more you get closer, you feel closer to the person with BPD, and you believe that they were getting as close to you as you were to them. You start spending more and more time together. You did in the beginning, right? And or however long the relationship kind of, quote, worked, unquote. And your exposure was increasing, but you didn't know that then. Dormant, unknown, emotional, and psychological borderline radioactivity. The codependent kryptonite is beginning to mean splitting and communication and relational difficulties. This is undetected radioactive exposure that at this point or that point for you remained unknown and unrealized. As your closeness grew, often with the first commitment of being exclusive in dating, in a relationship, is quickly followed by many people with BPD, more often than not, talking about moving in and or marriage. This is so quickly. This is setting up a series of micro splits to a major split to devaluation, as a borderline moves from fear of abandonment, will move from fear of abandonment into some kind of pseudo comfort zone that can last varying degrees of time, short, medium, or long range periods of time, depending on the person with BPD. And then they will move to the fear of engulfment very quickly, often. And you don't know what's happening, so you don't know what's coming at whatever point. As the borderline's radioactive effects start to be felt by you, confusion, fear, obligation, and guilt, fog, and denial keep you in hot pursuit through any and all, or allow you to continue the hot pursuit through any and all wounding experiences. This active, slow creep of relational impossibility is the codependent kryptonite not yet realized by so many at this point. You are being exposed to borderline incongruence, lack of self, relating to you as parent representation, and his or her unconscious seeking to get identity through you. The petulance, the self-only focus, the self-destructiveness, the hurting you, the revving up the borderline mantra, what about me? The as yet at that stage, unknown, slow creep of, quote, I hate you, don't leave me, unquote, the emotionally, psychologically radioactive reality already inching you and the person with BPD, unbeknownst to you at that point in a relationship, to the closer and closer apart experience that this radioactive exposure will unfold for you, which is the codependent kryptonite, but it takes people a long time to come out of the denial and the fog to start realizing all of this. They distance eventually at one point or another, or many times over. You pursue. They sooner or later respond. Sometimes, not always. You then start talking again. Talking is often not realized. This talking that is not often yet realized, totally at cross purposes, from differing emotional worlds. You want to clarify and understand what happened. You probably also like to seek redress for how hurt you were when the person with BPD withdrew or exploded into rage. You seek a meeting of the minds after each psychological and emotional radioactive episode of the person with BPD. You're seeking closure and reparation of each episode over and over and over after BPD episode, and you don't realize, you're not aware then, you're not getting anything back. You're not getting explanations. They're not taking personal responsibility. You are already in a state of not only, quote, love addiction, unquote, but you're in a state of confused, not able to quite understand that you're not getting closure, that you're getting satiated by if you can get back to okay. But often before that happens, each one of these BPD radioactive emotional psychological episodes is going to be leading to often conversations that will be hours long jade circular arguments where the borderline defends and throws in the red herring. You're trying to use logic and reasoning from your confusion, still in denial, experiencing codependent kryptonite. It's ripping you apart, but you're not on board with that right now. You're still focused on them and how is this going to work? And you need to make it work. So you have questions, and the borderline is radioactively triggered. And here comes the next withdrawal or rage. Maybe they kept you up all night in that radioactive jade conversations wherein there's that red herring argument, the changing topics, the moving all the pieces around, the accusations slung at you so quickly you don't even remember what you were talking about or trying to address with the person with BPD. Splitting cycles. The person with BPD, they don't have the tools. Splitting cycles are inevitable, and they don't have the tools or emotional maturity or emotional intelligence or identity of self to offer any true understanding from, because they don't understand. They can't take any personal responsibility or answer your questions, or at least not in any in-depth or lasting or really make logical sense kind of way. So they're going to rapid fire turn on you and accuse you and throw in the red herring and change the subject, and they also have an inability to tolerate your effort toward reparation, because people with BPD have the adverse childhood experience of repetition compulsion cycles in trying to relate to a parent, often a cluster B parent, that always ended in futility for the person with BPD in childhood, ended in relational rupture, ended in closer and closer apart. This slow creep borderline reality is the relational impossibility between the radioactive borderline with the slow creep overall arcing repetition compulsion of it all to your codependent kryptonite. And that codependent kryptonite inside of you is housed in your wounded inner child who might be still repressed way down deep in your unconsciousness. And that's where you need to start to focus, not continued focus on the person with BPD after it's all said and done, or on and off, or whatever the case right now. So more splitting is triggered emotional dysregulation as the intensity of the borderline emotional and psychological radioactivity exponentially increases to DEFCON level 1, of maladaptive defense mechanisms, of me, their survival. They don't see you, they don't hear you, they don't love you, they haven't attached to you, they don't have an ability to love you. And the codependent kryptonite of the wounded inner child in all these circumstances and relational difficulties is that people with codependency have an element of false self, and you're not really prepared to be able to be met with healthy love. And so the codependent kryptonite drives you even more in the pursuit of this, quote, borderline love, unquote, that isn't love and isn't attachment. And so these Jade conversations, these BPD episodes, another day, another night, days or weeks or even months or more lost in relational devastation for you. More rapid fire text back and forth for many people in different stages of this. You're either left in the painful abandonment of searing silence or to the experience of a seemingly unending barrage of accusations, blame attacking you for what they've just done to you. Codependent kryptonite holds you in a deep, painful denial, and you feel responsible for the unknown radioactive exposure as if you created it, when no, they brought it with them, and they're the radioactivity of DEFCON 1 exposure that you're enduring in the kryptonite that is your codependence. The codependent in you just wants it to all be okay again. These cycles for various times in relationships may yield some okay or good times again, and then back to being exposed to borderline emotional, psychological radioactivity again, exposing you in your subconscious, unconscious, codependent kryptonite emotional landscape of devastated ruination again and again with the borderline, a devastated ruination that is housed in your wounded inner child. These are the codependent repetition compulsion cycles that people are unaware of unless they get into recovery and healing processes. You are losing yourself, or you lost yourself in this case. You're trying to help regulate, or you were trying to help regulate the borderline's constantly rocking emotional mood states at the expense of your own needs every single time. It hurts, and it hurts so much, and it may still hurt so much, even if it's on, off again, or off, or over, or you don't know. Could be even months to years later, and it could still really hurt. Familiar to codependence very subconsciously is this pain that you're being caused by the borderline radioactivity. It is, in a very unhealthy, unconscious, unknowing way, soothing, but not really soothing, but addressing and being taken in by you as a codependent, your wounded inner child's desperate attempts on that level of parent, adult, child, the child level inside of you unconsciously. That level of the connection to the borderline radioactivity exposure leaves people in their codependent kryptonite with this woundedness that is unaddressed, almost feeling, really unknowingly, that all that you're going through, quote, hurts so good, unquote. It doesn't in the here and now of it all, but to your wounded inner child, quote, the familiarity is not breeding contempt, unquote. The familiarity is breeding a deeper neediness to reconnect, but it's not really to the borderline, it's to the parent that the wounded inner child was abandoned by, hurt by, that you had some adverse childhood experience with and suffered as a consequence. People with BPD never get it. They don't take personal responsibility, and they can't acquiesce. They can't see you. They can't see what you're putting forth. They don't get it. They must manipulate you to agree that they are right. You are exhausted. You are more and more exhausted. You get more and more depleted. So much discomfort, ignoring your own needs. You know they are not right. But how many times did you, or are you still? You will capitulate and abandon yourself over and over and over again, exposing the codependent kryptonite of the agony of the wounded inner child deep within your unconscious. That is, as much as the pain that you think is all about the borderline, oh no, it goes deeper inside of you as well. And maybe in any given cycle, The borderline withdraws and ghosts for what has become a rather predictable period of time for each individual with a person with BPD. They can become somewhat predictable as the individuals with BPD that they are and what their cycles are. And then maybe the radioactive level has reached breakup after each cycle, only to then in differing ways and periods of time, with the hoovering or reverse hoovering, getting back together again and again until suddenly, as if without warning, critical mass, DEFCON 1 radioactive level reached again inside the borderline, unbeknownst to you. Your codependent kryptonite, you're starting to drown, but it's over. And some people know that, and some people don't know that. So you might not have known that it was over. You might still feel like you don't know if it's over. You pursue the hazardous radioactivity. Codependent kryptonite at some point or other gets blown wide open. In the deep, horrifying depths of codependent kryptonite, you lose even more to self. You are now feeling the full effects of this emotional, psychological radiation. You are now overexposed and starting to emotionally, psychologically, and maybe even physically feel ill. You're lacking sleep, or you were, or you may still be, unable to focus on anything or anyone else but the borderline and what happened, distraught, pain rising inside, love addicted, wanting, needing, longing, stuck there, ruminating. The silent or loud slow creep of the unknown, inevitable borderline radioactivity of relational impossibility has infiltrated your mind, your feelings, overtaking you, subsuming you. Now what? Self-preservation to seek healing, or around the cycle again to the same devastation, same end again and again until the borderline isn't there anymore and you're still left in the emotional, psychological, radioactive ruins. Borderline emotional, psychological radioactivity breaks many down quickly and many others much more slowly. Where are you at now? What do you know now? How much do you hurt? How stuck are you in ruminating and the painful withdrawal, just needing, just longing for, just one more hit, one more try, one more chance that can turn into countless one more chance after one more chance. Feeling and believing this was your fault, the codependent nightmare of your inner child's mounting need for you to rescue him or her. Are you still trying to rescue the borderline or relationship instead of that wounded, hurt, devastated, needing you inner child and yourself? Are you still drowning inside the ocean of codependent kryptonite that seeks to be re-exposed via the addiction, the love addiction, and the chemical soup of what's happened to you, that seeks to be unconsciously exposed again and again to your codependent kryptonite? Are you in no man's land of a radioactive, emotional, psychological explosion, too confused and shattered to know you need to stop and seek shelter from the emotional radiation of the borderline? Is it all just still too compelling? Have you lost almost or totally abandoned yourself to the point even you don't matter compared to needing just one more hit of the borderline idealization long after that's even possible? Is that it's time to save yourself. I can help you if you resonate with me. So the borderline radioactivity, the slow creep that you can't be aware of until it's all said and done, has hit you square in the codependent kryptonite. That is what you need to know more about and understand what that means for you in your life, to your knowing self, to your healing something that was in you foundationally from childhood, unfortunately, from adverse experience that led to the relationship with a person with BPD or NPD, that led you to the cluster B, unbeknownst to you by the wounded inner child.